Hi, my name is Darnell, and I'm a worship leader here at the Austin Stone. Often we get asked the question of how do you know you are called to ministry? I think my first answer is the fact that we are all called to ministry. It's just what does that calling look like for us? We see in 2 Corinthians 5 that we've all been given the ministry of reconciliation as believers. And we're also all commanded by Jesus to fulfill the Great Commission and to evangelize the lost with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So in a word, we're all called to ministry. But the real question is, how do you know you're called to vocational ministry? I think the first place to look is the scriptures. We see that when Jesus was calling his disciples, he simply went up to them while they were fishing and said, hey, come follow me. But it was different with Paul. Paul was walking on the road to Damascus. He was persecuting Christians when the Lord showed up with a bright light and blinded him and called him to follow him and called him to ministry. And it was also different with Timothy. Timothy was at the church that Paul had helped start, and Paul just started discipling him because he saw potential in him. So even for the early believers in the church and those who helped found the church, their callings look different as well. I know for me, the process of being called to ministry is also different than a lot of my peers. I started off leading worship when I was in high school. My youth pastor asked me if I would start leading because I played guitar and I could sing, but also because he saw some sort of potential leadership in me. So I willfully said yes, even though I didn't know what I was doing. After I graduated high school, went off to college where I helped lead worship at different ministries. Didn't really know if that was a calling in my life, but I knew I enjoyed it. But it became very clear when I finished college and knew that my calling was no longer to be an engineer, which is what I was studying in college. And so I began to pursue other options. At that time, I was leading worship at my church in College Station, Texas, and the worship pastor of that church asked if I was interested in an internship. And I said yes, because I wanted to explore this idea, am I being called to ministry? Is this something that God is putting on my heart? And so after that internship, which was awesome, it was very clear that God was calling me to ministry. And so at that point, I started pursuing worship leading positions at churches in Houston and Dallas, but nothing really stuck out to me of where I felt called, a church that I felt like I belonged to. And so I did what any post-college student would do. I got a job at the Apple store and just began praying, asking God, all right, is this what I'm called to? Is this what my future looks like? It took about 3 years before I had that calling again. I was up in Dallas. I was working for a Christian multimedia company. And I was connected with a church planner here in Austin, Texas. He was looking for a worship leader. And at that moment, I just felt this is what God was calling me to. This is where he was calling me to. And so I obeyed. Now, it's going to look different for everyone. But I think there are 3 very practical things that you can do to see if you are called to ministry. The first thing to do is to ask God. Spend time in prayer. Ask God, am I being called to ministry? Is this what you have for me in your will? I think the second thing to do is to ask others. Ask those around you, ask your peers, ask your friends, ask those that you're in relationship to, people that actually will be honest with you. Ask them and see if they see giftings in you, if they see leadership, if they see a calling in you. I think the third thing is just to ask yourself, are you passionate about ministry? Are you passionate about the gospel? Do you feel that you are called to ministry? And I think if you can answer yes to all those 3, I think the next step is to seek further development, whether it's an internship or residency at a church, whether it's just volunteering in kids or students. Take that next step in and say, okay, God, is this what you have for me? I know it's going to look different, but in my experience, that has always been the path that God has for me. He might not give you your answers right away. Like I said, for me, it took 3 years before I really knew for certain that I was called to ministry. But we have to learn to trust him. And I think that's a great aspect of seeking out God in all these things. So hopefully that helps answer your question if you are called to ministry.